About 150 years after the king we've been talking about in the book of Esther, Xerxes, about 150 years after he was done with things, his great-great-great-great-great-grandson, something like that. It was a lot of greats, I suppose. He comes along, and he's effectively the last ruler, the last Achaemenid ruler of Persia, and his name is Darius as well. It's Darius III, and he gets in a fight with Alexander the Great, Alexander of Macedon. And we've talked about Alexander the Great a whole bunch, and there's so many interesting little snippets about how that march of conquest ended up working out. So Alexander, he locks horns for the first time with Darius III at the Battle of Issus. And we know a lot about how this battle went down. It's pretty well documented. The ancient historian Plutarch tells us a bunch about the life of Alexander. The way things ended up playing out is Darius falls over the front of his chariot, and his pants come up over the top of him, and he looks like a fool, and he flees the battlefield, and he leaves his family behind. No joke. What does that say? What would it take for you to do that? That's pretty dark. So Alexander, according to Plutarch, after the battle, he's going to figure out, what did I just win? Because when you beat somebody in the ancient world, and maybe when you beat somebody now, you get their stuff. There's a reversal that occurs. Reversals like what we've been seeing in the book of Esther. There's an expectation that now you're the conqueror. You're the owner of whatever was theirs. So Alexander's going through the baggage train, and according to Plutarch, he says to himself, of all of the gold and silver and all of the fancy stuff for bathing and self-care, he says, wow, this, it seems, is royalty. He is delighted with things. And as he's getting all set up to take a fragrant bath with all of the spices and nice bathing equipment post-battle that Darius left when fleeing, he gets word that they found Darius's family, his wife and his daughter and his mom, who were all left behind with all of the royal baggage and wealth. So it would seem that we're getting an even bigger reversal, an even bigger conquest. Now, here's the deal. We're about to learn a lot about Alexander when we get to this point in the story, because if Alexander were going on some sort of revenge march, well, he's going to torch things and kill people, and he's going to inflict harm on the family of his enemy. If he's simply going on a march of conquest, well, that's different. It's not personal. I just want all your stuff. Now, look, I don't think either of those things are terribly moral, and I don't recommend doing any of this, but I'm telling you this story for a reason, because it's Esther. We're going to get to Esther here in just a minute. It's all going to make sense. So they go, and Alexander and his right-hand man, they meet the family of Darius, and the family falls at the feet of the right-hand man of Alexander, because I guess he was a little taller. He looked a bit more noble. And then they're like, oh, no, we blew it. We violated royal protocol. Now we're really in trouble. But Alexander has a laugh about it. He's like, no, it's okay. You know, I kind of see it. Yeah, he's pretty impressive. But I'm actually the king, and it's nice to meet all of you, and here's what you need to know. There's a little bit of paraphrasing going on here, but this gets right to the heart of what Plutarch tells us about it. He says, I'm not going to harm any of you. You're all safe. You'll all be treated like royalty because you are royalty. That's irrevocable. And he reassures them by saying, quote, Darius is not dead. And then he lets them know that, according to Plutarch, they need not fear for any harm from Alexander, who was making war upon Darius only for dominion. They should themselves be provided with everything they had been used to receiving from Darius. And then Alexander lets them bury their dead and everything else, and gradually he really comes to enjoy talking with the hyper-intelligent mother of Darius III, who is a shrewd, sophisticated woman, and he comes to hold her in very high regard. He doesn't exactly hit it off with Darius's wife, who I believe was pregnant at the time. And eventually, after he had completely defeated Darius III, Alexander ends up marrying one of his daughters. That becomes Alexander's second of 3 wives. Why am I telling you all of this? Well, because it's a really good story, and it kind of gives us a little bit of an idea of how everything plays out in the grand history of Persia, but also because there's a conquest reversal that happens here. And over time, Alexander treats the family of Darius so well that He even offers to let them go back to Darius. Darius offers to pay to get them back. He's like, no, you don't have to pay. We'll just let them go back if they want to go back. And they're all like, no, we get treated better here. And I think the chances of us being left behind with the baggage while our benefactor flees is far less with Alexander than it is with you, Darius III. So they're still pretty mad about getting left behind at Issus. And ultimately, Darius loses to Alexander again at the Battle of Gaugamela and dies shortly thereafter. And Alexander sort of adopts Darius's family. He fashions himself as the king of Persia, the king of kings. In a sense, he takes the baton as the Achaemenid ruler of Persia, even though he's a Macedonian. Not that weird, because as we've discussed, there's a lot of overlap between Greek culture and Persian culture. But one of the takeaways that the ancient author really wants the original audience to understand to get how complete Alexander's victory over Darius III is to understand that he not only got all of his stuff, he not only got his kingdom, but he got the loyalty of his family. Total reversal. Alexander takes the place of Darius III. Now, those events being described are happening roughly in the same cultural generational ballpark with the same sensibilities as the era we're looking at here in the book of Esther. And it would seem that the author of Esther felt the same compulsion to really let the audience know that, hey, as you think of conquest, this is total conquest. Mordecai and Esther have completely defeated Haman. He is gone. The threat of him is totally eliminated because all of the resources that Haman had at his disposal, all of the relationships, everything, they are either gone or transferred to Mordecai and Esther in a complete and total ancient world victory in the fashion of the later Alexander the Great over Darius III. This is how the description of that total conquest reads in Esther 8, verse 1. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. We've obviously got a lot more to talk about in terms of the implications of this for the story. We've also got to talk about why there are more pages to the book of Esther. It feels like we're done here. Everything worked out, but there is still a grand tension that exists that we'll start talking about next time around. But first, I just want to pause to appreciate that in our context, there would be certain indicators to say, this was a total victory for Party A and a total humiliation for Party B. Party A is no longer in any way threatened by Party B. Everyone sees that Party A is the complete and total winner and assents to this new reality, and no one is still holding out a case for Party B. There are things in our culture that would communicate that kind of total victory that we speak in our cultural language. Movies over the decades have tried to capture that moment. Think about Marty McFly defeating Biff, and all of a sudden the girls don't like Biff anymore, and he's covered in poop, and he looks like a big dumb idiot, and he's not going to be bullying anybody anymore. Well, that defeat the bully, humiliate them, you got poop on you, and the pretty girls don't like you anymore. That was a good way to communicate total victory in sort of a high school mindset in the 1980s. You get what I'm driving at. We know from within the Bible and from extra biblical texts what total personal victory over a rival looked like and what expectations would be associated with that in the era of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. And the author of the book of Esther is going out of their way to say that complete and total victory has occurred here. We'll break down more about what that means next time around. Quick note. I saw that for whatever reason of late, a bunch of you have needed to tap out on the Patreon support thing. That is totally cool, and I think it's really important from time to time for me to just remind you, hey, there's no expectation that that's a forever thing. Thank you so much for carrying the baton while you did. That is absolutely awesome, And sometimes when you do something like that, or you work with somebody on a certain thing in a certain way for a while, and then it doesn't make sense anymore, you can't do it, just life happens or whatever, it can feel like, now there's weirdness. There ain't weirdness. All I feel is gratitude for you helping to make this thing happen for the time that you did. Thank you so very, very much for that. Thanks to everybody who makes this happen by supporting the program now or ever has. I'm just so grateful to all of you who've done that at any point. Thank you. It means the world. I love doing this, and you're the reason that we get to. So it's hyper appreciated. All right. Now I think that's enough. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.